Hello, I'm Lisa Rao, and I've had the privilege and fun of working for this company for more than 20 years, and the honor of working with Jack and Pete Herschend, the co-founders of this great company and the men who built the foundation for Herschend Family Entertainment. They are living examples of servant leadership, Christian principles, and entrepreneurial spirit. We hope that by sharing their stories, you'll be able to gain some insight and some perspective into the heart of this company. All right, Sherry, then. First question, what 3 words would you use to describe your spouse?
Off the top of my head, the 3 that would come to mind would be his humbleness. I'll give you an example in a minute. And his honesty. And you couldn't leave out entrepreneurial. He's, humbleness because he always gives people credit, other people credit for everything he's done. Any HFEC, personally, in our relational with friends, they're always the people that come up with the ideas when I sat and heard him tell them to me. And so I love that about him, that he's so humble. And honesty fits right in with that too. I mean, and of course, the whole place speaks of his entrepreneurialism, so.
Well, thank you. That was the longest 3 words I've heard in a long time.
Well, okay. I'll be more brief, I promise. No one expects me to be brief, Jack, on video or anything.
Faith and fun and energy. Unbounded, unlimited energy.
Thank you.
Trustworthy, loving, devoted, caring. That's 4.
Aw. I would say loving and humorous, steady, solid. When he hears the Lord speak to him, he does it. He doesn't wonder about it.
She left out cook.
And for the last 5 years, one of the most amazing cooks in all of Branson. Cooks and shops and does it all. He's been wonderful.
What attracted you most to Sherry?
Well, remember, first of all, I was scared to death of girls. I never dated in high school. And I was tongue-tied whenever I was around a gal. I have, still to this day, I have some trouble that way. And I don't know where that comes from. But when I saw Sherry and I saw her smile and her laugh, I was hooked. I was weak in the knees.
What about you? What attracted you first to Jack?
That one is probably the easiest question I could ever be given. He was so respectful of his mother, and I'm going to get emotional. And I'd always been told, watch a fellow that you date, and you will know what he's going to be like in a marriage or with you if you see how he treats his mother.
Your mother had quite a role in this.
Very much so. May I tell the story?
Sure.
I didn't know there was a Sherry. And I fell in love with Fanabelle. I was 17 and she was 50. And we guided together, and she would guide 5 trips to the waterfall, which is 505 feet vertically into the ground, 5 times a day. So she'd climbed over 2,500, this is a half mile, up steps in a day. And then she would go cave exploring with me at night.
Her accolades over this young man, I never heard that out of my mother, and I just had to meet him. And I was so impressed. I was so impressed with him.
One little bit more about Fanabelle. Fanabelle was mostly Irish, I think maybe near 100% Irish, with a great sense of humor. And I thought Fanabelle was my dear friend who would never, ever do anything mean to me.
That's our first date.
And so Sherry was dating a big, handsome guy who square danced on Ozark Jubilee, which was big at that nationwide television out of Springfield. And he had a brand new truck, and handsome guy, big guy. And I was little, had an old Chevy coupe, and I didn't think I stood a chance. And I'd never asked a girl for a date. But I went to Fanabelle and I said, your daughter might say yes if I invited her to go to White River, now Table Rock Lake, by horseback for lunch. And Vanderbilt said, oh, that's a great idea. She had 4 horses. And so Sherry said yes, and I had never been on a horse, but this was important to get the first date. And Vanderbilt gave me a horse that had not been ridden in 3 years. And old paint did not want to be ridden. And so I knew to get on the horse from the left. That's all I knew. I swung my leg over the horse, and he immediately did this hi-oh silver thing. And being a wrestler, I threw a full Nelson on his neck to hold on. And he did that 2 or 3 more times, and then took a run toward the barn, going under every low-hanging branch he could find, trying to scrape me off. And Lisa, I looked around, I'm holding on to the horse. This is absolute truth. Both Sherry and Vanderbilt were on the ground, laughing hysterically with tears running down their face. That was the start to my very first date.
All right, well, I'm just going to kind of hit you guys with something. I think that for many, many people who have known you for a lot of years, I think a lot of people would say that it's one of the greatest love stories of all time. I think that we would say that there's certainly a true relationship we would aspire to all have in our lives. What are some of the things that have been part of your lives that have helped you build this?
Oh my goodness, I married one of the most amazing men in the entire world. I mean, that's the key right there. Don't know how I found him, don't know how he waited for me. I can't figure any of that out.
I know how she found me. She found me on the streets of Silver Dollar City. And this shy little girl who was working in the general store, and of course, this was in 1963. In 1963, Main Street was gravel, and the parking, what's now the Village Square, was the parking lot. And I was Zeke Hatfield, and she was Sarah Ellen McCoy, and that's when we first held hands. I could even barely remember her name at the time. Sarah Ellen I could remember.
And when I first met him, I was blackening out my tooth in front of the little tiny mirror in the dressing room. And he came up behind me, and over the top of my head, he was messing up his hair, I think.
You've told some funny stories about being street characters in the early years. And there's one particular one that involves a flower and a frog.
What I was given when I came to work here was the plot in general, and about 3 key lines.
Of the Hatfield.
Of the Hatfield and McCoy, yes. I played Sarah Ellen McCoy. And one of the lines were, when I saw Zeke, his mom had drawn a line in the sand. What was it, gravel actually, that we weren't supposed to cross. And so we were standing over the line, and he said, hey, Sari, I got you a fleer. And Sari says back to him, I never had no fleer before. And then he gives it to her, and they hold hands. And then after that, the shooting starts, and all kinds of things happen. So during the summer of that year, I was given by him such things as a...
I gave her a toady frog, a real one.
I mean, this big.
You held the fleur behind you. It was a surprise, you know.
Being a flower.
Being a
flower.
Well, of course, a fleur is a flower. And I held it. Zeke held it behind him. Well, she knew, but I had her by the other hand.
Yeah, we were all
so she wasn't. Hands. I mean, it looked like we were holding hands. I was clamped on. She wasn't going to go anywhere. And so I had found this toady frog. There is no such thing, by the way, but that's what Zeke called it. I found this toad as we were walking around getting ready to do the show. So I just grabbed it and held it in place of the fleur. And she knew something was wrong, but she couldn't go anywhere. And we were in the middle of the show, and I said, I brought you a toady frog. She was not entertained.
And I said, I ain't never had no toady frog before.
You were married?
In Marble Cave. Chicago Tribune said she looked like a white moth floating down through there, and I was only thinking about catching on fire because my skirt kept hitting the candles, and I would say, Daddy, move over. But that was my dream from the day we started dating, was to someday get married in there.
Well, when you did get married, what was one of the first things that you learned about each other that you didn't know prior to making the commitment?
I was just shocked that this workaholic, I had no idea he was going to be gone day and night and be such a driven is the word, and at the time, to me it was not a good word. Now it is. You know, I think of him now as being driven as good. But
How'd you
back
feel
then,
about that at the time?
at the time I didn't feel very good about it at all. And I had no idea. It was such a surprise to me because he is funny, he's fun-loving, and we, you know, all of these great things that I knew about him.
To me, the biggest mistake that I made in my adulthood, I fell into the lie of it's not so much the amount of time you spend with your family, it's the quality of the time you spend with your family. Now, it's both time and quality are essential to a great marriage and to being the proper parent. So with the boys, I was their scoutmaster, I was their Sunday school leader, I'd spent quality time. But what Sherry and the boys needed were quantity and quality, and that was a big mistake on my part. But I didn't know better. The thing that surprised me most was the depth of Sherry's faith. I was not a believer at the time we were married. I was 21, didn't come to know the Lord until I was 28, so we had 7 years while she was a woman of great faith and I was not. And she would take our 3 sons to go to church every Sunday, and she would invite me, but she never pushed, for which I'm very grateful. Had she pushed, I'd have run. But Sherry had a lot to do with my coming to faith because of the depth of her faith and just being a consistent practicer of her faith.
What did you encounter in those early years that was truly a challenge?
In the early years of Silver Dollar City, one of the things as I look back, we were a young family. We had John a year after we were married. And every spring and every fall, I would take off for between 4 and 6 weeks home, usually on Saturday, but oftentimes we had to leave on Sunday for a week at a time, doing public relations tours with Don Richardson and the Craftsman. And as I look back on the burden that threw to Jody, new wife, new mom, that was a hard one. That was hard on our marriage. Not hard in the sense of divorce, but hard in terms of a relationship, because every week when I'd come home, it was like walked through the door and it was you had to reconnect. We are striving. We are not perfect. We're striving towards being more tomorrow than we are today. We're striving to make love a verb in our lives, in our kids' lives, and in the company. I'll tell you, we went through, Jody mentioned the last 5 years. Without going into any particular detail, that has been a real, not a trial of our marriage, nothing to do with that, but as she went through the issues with cancer and the recovery, and we're still in treatment recovery, it shaped a new dimension in our life. It was a life-threatening dimension, no question. We're past that now. We made it, thank God.
Well, and one of the big issues for me that was kind of put to rest, you know, I grew up in the 60s and I opened my own doors and felt pretty independent. And so when I was so sick, it was hard for me sometimes to lean on him. And he, can I put this? He'd say, Jody, it's my job to take care of you. Just let me take care of you. And that was a hard thing to do all the time.
Let's talk about some advice. You guys dole out some advice for parents and then also for grandparents.
Well, I think the issue of balance would be the best parenting advice that I would have coming from the mistakes I made. And grandparenting is a little different. Grandparenting is more the exercise of what you learned being a parent, the mistakes you made, the things you did right, and so the second time around you're better prepared. I think as I think about our grandchildren, listening to them was very, very important. Looking to understand their giftedness. Even as a young person, you get glimpses of what their giftedness is and what their strengths are. And once you see that, then whenever the grandchild exercises that, then you support that, you encourage it, and you reward them with encouragement. So I hear grandparents say, oh, it's so nice to be a grandparent because you get to love them and then leave them. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think it's much, much more being able to be more successful as a grandparent than we were as parents.
Time. Nothing equates anything better with love. I mean, it's time. It's your time. And your kids knew it, and that's why occasionally they've made this very important with their own kids. I mean, Jim and all, every one of our children, they want time with their children because they know what happened in the early years with their dad and not having that. But I think that just speaks to them. And then grandchildren, I've always said you need to be their first and best friend in the whole world, because you don't need to be friends with your kids that much. You need to show them time and undivided attention. Just give them the full attention, and Jack does that so well.
I learned a lesson from Jody. She taught it to me in our early, from day one, and it applies to parenting. And that is, no matter how angry you are at your kid that day, or how disruptive the child may be, every day to each of your children, you not only tell them you love them, but you touch them and tell them you love them. And you can be angry because whatever they did, or they can be wonderful, whatever they did. But you touch them and tell them you love them every day.
Grandparents don't get to parent. Grandparents just get to say, I love you a lot and how wonderful you are a lot, which is all true. But you get to do all the cream on the top as a grandparent, which is wonderful.
You asked, what advice would we have for married people? And that's a great question, and one I've thought a lot about. When we date, we see only the perfection, the great strengths of the person we date. Then we get married and we do the same thing. They can do no wrong, they're absolutely perfect. And in about 2 years, you realize that your mate is not perfect and is in fact flawed, like all of humanity. And now comes the critical decision. Are you going to focus on the flaws, or are you going to focus on what you fell in love with to begin with? So to me, the huge gift that can be given to marriages when they realize it is just the gift of a sincere compliment. It's very easy to overlook criticism when you have been bombarded with sincere compliments. So that would be the gift I would give to young marrieds and old marrieds, of the gift of sincere compliments.
And he does it. He writes me a love note. If I must stay up late. And so when I'm doing my emailing at 2 in the morning and I go to bed, if I get up at 7, he's gotten up at 6, I have love notes in there. And they're wonderful love notes. And usually a compliment about something that's happened the day before. So that's really true.
Something else too that was I think was very valuable to all of us. Just a little background. My dad was an alcoholic, and I took my mother to Al-Anon, which is for spouses and children and everybody related to alcoholics. And one of the things that I learned through that was that when someone hurts you, you don't say, "Oh, okay, it's nothing." You say, that hurt and I didn't like it, but I forgive you for it. Mm-hmm. And that's been the biggest thing for us, all of us. If you say, what's the biggest thing that the biggest, most important thing you would say about marriage? I would say, give mercy. Constantly give mercy to people, because we are so imperfect. We're always stepping on toes, even when we don't know it. And we have no clue that we've done something that's a problem.
She is so right. It's more, it isn't just saying, I forgive you. Jody says that to me when I'm late. I work late at the office, whatever. Hey, I forgive you. You forgot that we were supposed to be somewhere, but I forgive you. It is forgetting, because forgiving and then bringing it up a week, a month, a year. I know people who bring things up 10 years ago. You stepped on my toes. And that means that they've carried that poison inside them.
How about a story that you want to live on forever within your families?
This may sound really weird, but the one thing I would love to leave behind are our failures, because out of those failures have come stories of success. It would have been so good had we told them a lot of our failures, so that they would have felt like they could achieve some things on their own. It took years for him to find out, and for us to knock him off that pedestal with our sons. And I don't know if it had been different with girls, but with 3 sons, that's what we were dealing with.
I would like to add that while I was up on that pedestal, it was wonderful. It was rarefied air up there, and I was godlike, and it was good, but not healthy.
What is it, Sherry, that you really feel strongly about that people don't know about Jack?
Well, because he is so much fun-loving, and he's such a good listener, and he listens into everybody, and they think that they've just got his total. He is so introverted. I mean, way off of the charts introverted. And I love it here, and we're so totally different. We were at an event honoring a celebrity in New York, and we were with Gary Smalley, the famous guru of marriage counseling. And Gary and Norma are just like us, total opposites. Gary and I are these little butterflies, these little gold otters. He calls us otters, and playful and all this. And Jack and Norma are the very opposite. So Gary and I were there just flittering all around. And we looked at each other and we said, "Where's Jack?" And he said, "Where's Norma?" This hall was so long, like a football field. Way back in the dark, in a corner, was this little round table, and there sat my husband with Norma, wanting to go home. And so that surprises so many people out here. The employees would never believe that about him.
What was the best thing you did for your kids?
Oh, I think loving each other. I think that was the best thing we ever did for our kids.
I think it probably is the traditions of the family that have made the difference, and some of those traditions are big in our family. Cookie baking day involves the entire clan, the entire Herschend, and a whole bunch of hangers-on. That's a tradition, but we have a tradition of how we were together, how we ate together, what trips that we did together.
What's coming to my mind is a picture. I have a picture in my mind. As I say that, I had 2 thoughts. One was, we were talking about the traditions of eating together, of having our meals together. And we always played classical music during dinner. And this is just a silly little memory, but I love it, and I think all of our kids remember it too. I mean, we would do such things as, we'd say the prayer, and then we'd sing amen, but we'd do it like this. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
Amen. And one night we had a piece of music on that had a lot of little ups and downs, and everybody was going up and down at the table. So we had a lot of fun doing all of that. And then I was remembering a day we were in the Cayman Islands, and it rained all day long. And we walked across the street, you know, almost through a river, because it was a lot of rain, and sat in this restaurant and had lunch. And then we started talking, and the kids started telling us things we didn't know that they had done. You remember that?
Yeah.
That was so much fun. And we're going, you did not!
So family night was a big
It
deal.
was.
And the boys responded so well. Each got, every third Monday, they got to choose the menu, they got to choose what games we played, etc. And it was a huge bonding experience.
You know, really, the take home from this conversation is so much about roots and the importance. And yet, look at HFE and enjoy the accomplishments of the roots of the corporation that has grown. Does that make you all proud?
It does now. I think earlier we were so busy trying to be better that it was very easy to fall in the trap of looking at what's wrong versus what's right. As we've grown older, we've gotten a much healthier perspective. And so we have been able to do just as you say, to celebrate the good things that Joel and the leadership team have made happen inside HFE. But that's a relatively recent benefit to the Herschend family. Always before, it was really correcting the wrongs, or what we perceived would make it better. So love the new role.
Do you all feel like you've touched many lives?
Yes, no question. We've had that opportunity. It isn't that we have been in the teacher and everybody else has been, because we have been part of a family that grew up together. You need to remember that when this was just a little McCoy and I was Zeke Hatfield, everybody in the company did everything. We were a family in that sense. The total employee roster when you started working was probably in the range of 30 to 35 people on the Silver Dollar City side. And it required, when we did a show, on a street show, every store shut down because that's where the actors were. And Jody would run back inside dressed as Sarah Ellen, and just a little torn up little dress.
Yeah, that was. Mm-hmm.
And she would be Sarah Ellen and selling whatever
Minor Shack tickets.
In Minor Shack tickets and in the general store, Pete would immediately go back down and change into Minor Shack tour guide or the sheriff or whatever I was supposed to be next.
Thanks for the opportunity
Yeah.
for sharing that. We don't get this opportunity
No, you
often,
never
so
talk about it.
Thank you for the chance to do this.
If you're still rolling, a gift is something you're given, but it really, really doesn't work unless you give it away, unless you share it. We've been given a great deal, and hopefully we've been able to share that gift.
And the gift is really great. I was thinking about the scripture about the man who invested his gift. And what you get to share is the increase. which is an amazing thing. I mean, you're not responsible for the increase. You work hard as you can, you know, to do the right things. But, you know, you're like a farmer. You can't make a crop grow. God has to give the increase.
We hope you enjoyed hearing the stories from Jack and Pete Herschend and the Herschend family. We hope you were able to gain some insight and some perspective into how this company became the great organization it is today. Thank you very much, and join us again soon.